You have clarity of life. When you reach this, something shifts inside you. You're no longer blinded by the illusions that once pulled you in during your younger years. You've seen enough, lived enough, and felt enough to finally understand what truly matters. You don't chase after empty validation anymore. You don't waste sleepless nights trying to fit into circles that were never meant for you. You've walked through the fire of heartbreak, disappointment, and rejection, and all of it has carved out a sharper vision within you.
At say clarity comes as a gift. You know the value of peace because you've experienced chaos. You know the worth of authenticity because you've seen the masks people wear. You know the power of health because you've watched how fragile the body can become when it's neglected.
Life has shown you that the glitter is not gold, and the loudest voices are often the most empty. You've learned to recognize truth, not because someone told you, but because you've lived long enough to feel the sting of lies. This clarity allows you to move differently.
You don't confuse busy with productive. You don't confuse popularity with love. You don't confuse material wealth with true abundance. You now understand that joy isn't in having more, but in needing less. You've stopped bargaining with your soul just to keep temporary people around. You can see through manipulation because you've survived it before. You can sense who belongs in your life, and you're not afraid to let go of who doesn't. Clarity at sea means you no longer carry the weight of unnecessary battles. You've reached a stage where you choose silence over arguments, peace over proving a point, and self-respect over forced connections. You see that the world can be loud, but your heart knows when to stay still. You recognize that not everyone deserves access to your spirit, and not ever.
Every invitation is worth attending. You've learned that life is not about pleasing the crowd. It's about honoring your soul, freedom from expectations. By the time you reach, see, you've carried the weight of other people's opinions long enough. You've been told how you should live, what you should accomplish, who you should marry, how you should raise your children, what kind of career you should pursue, and even how you should age for decades. You felt the pressure to measure up to standards that were never truly yours.
But once it arrives, there is a release. You realize that the invisible chains society placed on you have no power anymore unless you allow them to. At this stage, you are no longer living for approval. You are no longer chasing applause.
You are no longer bending yourself into someone else's version of it. Now you've discovered that the people who once judged you are either too busy with their own lives or have disappeared altogether, and that's when the freedom begins.
You no longer need to play a role in a script written by someone else. Freedom from expectations means you stop apologizing for who you are. If you want to take risks, you take them. If you want to start a new career, you begin it. If you want to live quietly, you embrace it. There is no pressure to prove, because you finally understand that the only person you ever truly needed to prove yourself to was yourself. It's a powerful release to realize you don't have to check boxes anymore. You don't have to dress a certain way to be respected. You don't have to speak a certain way to be heard. You don't have to accomplish certain milestones just to be considered successful. This strips away the performance, and with it the exhaustion of constantly trying to measure up. You also stop holding on to relationships out of obligation. If someone drains you, you walk away. If something no longer brings you peace, you release it. You've lived long enough to see the expectations often lead to disappointment, and so you stop letting them rule you. Instead, you live by your own truth, guided by your own spirit, fueled by your own vision. Courage, it comes natural by the time you reach. See, fear doesn't look the same as it once did in your house, and thus fear could stop you.
It could paralyze you into silence, hold you back from opportunities, and keep you clinging to the safety of what was familiar.
But after decades of living, after heartbreaks that didn't destroy you, after losses that you thought you'd never recover from, after failures that once felt unbearable but eventually shaped your strength, you realize fear is only temporary, but your resilience is permanent.
Courage is no longer something you have to search for. It becomes the air you breathe. You know now that rejection won't kill you. You know that falling doesn't mean the end. You've been through enough storms to recognize that you can survive rain, thunder, and fire and still rise standing.
That kind of knowing breeds cure. You don't talk yourself out of risks anymore because you've seen what happens when you settle you wither, and now you refuse to live a life that feels smaller than the spirit. Inside you, courage at this stage shows up in quiet ways too.
It's not always about grand leaps or dramatic changes. Sometimes it's the courage to say no after a lifetime of saying yes, the courage to walk away from people who no longer serve your growth, the courage to choose rest over exhaustion, peace over conflict, joy over duty.
It's the courage to live truthfully even if it means disappointing others, because you finally learned that betraying yourself is far worse. And then there's the courage to dream again. It's you dare to imagine new beginnings when others whisper that it's too late.
You dare to pick up the book you always wanted to write, start the business you always envisioned, or move to the place you always longed to live. You dare to reinvent yourself, because courage has taught you that time is not the enemy, it's an opportunity.
Every sunrise you wake to is proof that you are not done, yet that there is still room to grow, still room to create, still room to live in fullness. The gift of wisdom by few. Wisdom is no longer something you've read about in books or borrow from someone else's experience. It is something you carry in your bones and your scars, in the quiet corners of your heart. You've lived long enough to know that wisdom doesn't come from age alone, and it comes from reflection, from surviving the lessons life has handed you, and from choosing to see meaning even in the hardest moments. At this stage, you are no longer living for approval. You are no longer chasing applause.
You are no longer bending yourself into someone else's version of a novel, and you've discovered that the people who once judged you are either too busy with their own lives or have disappeared altogether, and that's when the freedom begins.
You no longer need to play a role in a script written by someone else. Freedom from expectations means you stop apologizing for who you are. Wisdom teaches you that not every battle is worth fighting. You've wasted energy on arguments that went nowhere, and now you know the power of silence. You've trusted people who betray you, and instead of closing your heart, wisdom showed you how to trust more carefully. You've chased after things that once glittered only to discover they weren't gold, and wisdom taught you how to measure value, not by shine, but by substance.
Etsy wisdom changes the way you see people. You no longer confuse charm with character. You no longer confuse
attention with love. You no longer confuse consistency with loyalty. You've learned to look beyond words and pay attention to actions, because life has proven that people reveal who they truly are not by what they promise, but by what they do when no one is watching.
Wisdom also changes the way you see yourself. You understand that mistakes were not failures, but stepping stones. You see how every detour shaped you, how every heartbreak softened you, how every challenge gave you strength you didn't know you had. You stop punishing yourself for the past, because wisdom whispers that every version of you was necessary to create the person you are today, and wisdom expands your perspective on life itself. You no longer rush through seasons. You've learned that some things bloom slowly, and that forcing them only ruins their beauty. You've learned that some doors close for your protection, not your punishment. You've learned that happiness is not in the destination, but in the journey, the moments of laughter, the small victories, the quiet mornings, the people who stayed when everything else fell apart.
Wisdom has taught you how to see abundance in simplicity, and how to be grateful even when life doesn't look perfect. Your energy is precious. By the time you reach, you finally understand that energy is your most valuable currency. You can lose money and make it back.
You can lose possessions and replace them, but once your energy is spent, it does not return in the same form. You begin to see how much of your life was wasted on things and people that did not deserve the best of you, and with that realization comes a fierce kind of protection.
You no longer give your energy away freely. Instead, you stop running to every call, every demand, every crisis that doesn't belong to you. You stop sacrificing your peace just to keep others comfortable. You stop pouring into people who only take and never pour back.
You know now that saying yes to everything is not kindness, it is self-neglect. So you learn the art of saying no, not with anger, but with wisdom, because you understand that every time you say yes to something that drains, you are saying no to yourself. Your energy is precious.
So you choose carefully. Where it flows, you begin to prioritize rest, health, and peace of mind. You no longer chase after toxic validation or beg for acceptance. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to fix people who do not want to be fixed.
Instead, you invest your energy into things that bring life back to you, books that inspire you, conversations that nourish you, places that calm your spirit, and people who uplift you. Rather than deplete you, you also recognize how environments affect your energy. You have clarity of life.
When you reach to something shifts inside you, you're no longer blinded by the illusions that once pulled you in during your younger years. You've seen enough, lived enough, and felt enough to finally understand what truly matters. You don't chase after empty validation anymore. You don't waste sleepless nights trying to fit into circles that were never meant for you. You've walked through the fire of heartbreak, disappointment, and rejection, and all of it has carved out a sharper vision within you. At sea, clarity comes as a gift.
You know the value of peace because you've experienced chaos. You know the worth of authenticity because you've seen the mass of people where. You know the power of health because you've watched how fragile the body can become when it's neglected. Life has shown you that the glitter is not gold, and the loudest voices are often the most empty. You've learned to recognize truth, not because someone told you, but because you've lived long enough to feel the sting of lies. This clarity allows you to move differently.
You don't confuse busy with productive. You don't confuse popularity with love. You don't confuse material wealth with true abundance. You now understand that joy isn't in having more, but in needing less. You've stopped bargaining with your soul just to keep temporary people around. You can see through manipulation because you've survived it before. You can sense who belongs in your life, and you're not afraid to let go of who doesn't. Clarity at sea means you no longer carry the weight of unnecessary battles. You've reached a stage where you choose silence over arguments, peace over proving a point, and self-respect over forced connections. You see that the world can be loud, but your heart knows when to stay still. You recognize that not everyone deserves access to your spirit, and not ever.
You no longer allow people to steal your time with meaningless drama, empty promises, or distractions that lead nowhere. You know now that every conversation, every moment, every choice is a withdrawal from the account of your life, and once it is spent, it cannot be returned.
So you choose with intention who deserves your hours, what is worth your focus, and where your presence truly belongs. At sea, you stop postponing joy. You no longer tell yourself, someday I'll travel, someday I'll risk, someday I'll pursue. Well, I love you understand that someday is not guaranteed. You stop saving your best clothes for a special occasion because you realize that waking up today is the occasion. You stop putting off dreams for the right time because wisdom has taught you that the right time is the moment. You decide to act. Time becomes sacred because you've seen how quickly it can be taken away. You've stood at funerals.
You've said goodbyes you never expected to say, and those moments etched a truth into your heart you cannot waste. What is finite? So instead of filling your schedule with obligations that drain you fill it with experiences that enrich you.
You create more laughter, more stillness, more moments of presence because you know those are the treasures you'll carry in your memory. You also begin to move slower, not because you are weak, but because you've learned the beauty of savoring.
You no longer rush through meals, conversations, or sunsets. You pause to feel, to taste, to breathe, to notice, because you finally understand that life is not in the big milestones alone, but in the tiny sacred moments hidden within the ordinary.
Time is no longer measured in hours on a clock, but in depth and meaning, in how fully you were alive within that moment. You found your true self by sit. The layers you once were to please the world begin to fall on.
In your earlier years, you were someone's daughter, someone's partner, someone's parent, someone's employee, someone's friend. You were titles, responsibilities, and expectations like heavy coats, often forgetting who you were beneath them. But whence it comes, there is a peeling back. You begin to see yourself clearly, not as a role you played, but as the soul you have always been. You've discovered What you will no longer tolerate, you no longer force yourself into spaces. Where you don't belong, you no longer shrink to make others comfortable. So you no longer betray your own spirit just to keep the peace. Instead, you stand in the fullness of who you are, unapologetic, and free the masks you wore in your past, to be accepted in your past, to be respected in your past, to be admired in your past, to be understood. They no longer matter.
After you've outgrown them all, finding your true self means recognizing your own voice. After years of listening to everyone else's, it means trusting your instincts, because life has shown you time and again that your intuition rarely lies. It means being at home in your own skin, no longer at war with your body, no longer wishing to be younger, smaller, prettier, or different. You've learned that beauty is not about age, it is about presence, the way you walk into a room carrying all that you've survived.
The way your laughter comes from a place of wisdom, the way your eyes reflect the strength of your journey at sea. You know what brings you joy, and you no longer apologize for choosing it. You know what drains you, and you no longer feel guilty for walking away from it.
You stop asking for permission to live because you finally understand that your life belongs to you. The approval you once chased has no hold over you because you have given yourself the permission to be exactly who you are.
Your true self is not defined by what you've lost, but by what you've gained in spirit. It is not defined by what others think of you, but by what you know to be true about yourself when the world is quiet.
It is not defined by how much time has passed, but by how much authenticity you bring into every moment that remains. And once you find itself, you protect it fiercely because you understand it is the most valuable discovery of your entire life.
When you stand at sea, you are not standing at the end, you are standing at the threshold of a new beginning. This is the age where clarity sharpens, freedom expands, courage rises, wisdom deepens, energy becomes sacred, time turns holy, and your true self finally shines through. It is not too late.
It is right on time, because everything you've lived, every hardship, every triumph, every tear, every lesson, it has all been preparing you for this moment, and now you hold the power to create a life that is not about what the world expects, but about and what your soul desires.
So when they tell you it means slowing down, remember this: it is the perfect age to rise up, to start over, and to step fully into the life that was always waiting for you.